You are listening to Know You're Crazy. My name is Susan Denee. We all have crazy. What separates us is how we choose to deal with it. I'm going to be delivering engaging and actionable tools to own your crazy, treat your crazy, and turn it into your own superpower. I hope that you walk away from this show feeling the power and strength within you. And never forget to enjoy your journey because you are worth it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and I am talking about emotional recovery in the raw. Most importantly, emotional elevation. Where in our lives can we take a step up emotionally to feel better about what we've got going on? And I have to share with you recently with several things I'm hearing from clients, myself, my own life experience. It has all been centered around communication. I very recently attended a wedding announcement, like engagement party, and they had this cool little setup where they were asking everybody to write a note about their advice for weddings or for marriage. And after the fact, when we were sharing about some of the messages that they received back, they had said that everybody, like 90% of the people, wrote down communication, 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 communication. You know, I know for me personally, communication has been one of the more challenging skill sets to take on. You know, you've got your professional communication, and then you have personal communication, communication that you have with your family, what's appropriate. And ultimately, at the core of all of our communication, whether that's with our partners, our bosses, our kids, our friends, is our belief system around what we think is appropriate and not appropriate with how we treat others. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, how we show up in the world and the words that we choose to use are all about a deeper belief system in our around relationships. You know, I've had all kinds of examples for me personally that have not gone well for one reason or another. If you've been listening to me for a while, you will hear me talk about two personality extremes. And these extremes are literally just at the core, most of us respond emotionally one or the other. And there's all kinds of different ways you could say this. Let me just put that out there. These are just the way I explain it. One of the core personalities is the bulldozer. That's going to be more of an outward expression, very abrupt, don't hold much back. You know, the title of the show is, are you getting tired of using a filter? Bulldozers, it's very handy if we have a filter in place that helps almost protect the party that's going to be receiving the direct communication. So that's one core personality. And there's a lot more that goes into that. I'm just giving an overview right now. The other core personality emotional response is what I like to call the doormat. The doormat is going to be more of the, they withhold, internally process things, not as communicative, not as comfortable about giving feedback. Sometimes it's almost like pride in reverse, where your bulldozer is going to be the outward pride and the outward blast of emotions, intensity. The doormat is the internal. It's the reverse pride. It's taking it in so much that the expression is never outward, it's inward. And whenever I give these two explanations, it's always felt to me as I'm talking to an audience or I'm talking to a client, like nobody wants to be the doormat. Like, don't call me a doormat. I got to tell you, the bulldozer's not all sunshine and rainbows. The bulldozer's, quite frankly, a jerk. Most of the time, if a bulldozer gets emotionally tipped over, they don't have the ability of a filter. So therefore, the damage that they do to their relationships is way more extreme, right? So they're going to do damage outwardly, which ultimately will affect them, where the doormat's damage is internally. So sometimes the doormat is in so much emotional pain from withholding so much expression that the relationships around them sometimes don't even realize what's going on. So there's really not one personality, core response that's better than the other. It's just, who you are if I give those descriptions and you think about your tendency to, not even tendency, just how do you communicate? What is your go-to? Are you someone who's afraid to give feedback in the midst of an intense conversation with your intimate partner? Are you easily persuaded to silence in an office meeting with your superiors? Or are you somebody who gets, like, you can feel the temper rise, the temperature rising and your temper about ready to go off if somebody says something in an office meeting that really upsets you? Like you're having a hard time holding it in. So the emotions kind of feel like they're going to bubble up, and then ultimately they come out forcefully. And then, all hell breaks loose and everybody's upset and hurt feelings. So why am I talking about that? Because today's topic is really about, in my experience, I have been both the bulldozer and the doormat. And I feel all of us are like that. I feel we have a little bit of each in us. For example, one of my stories is, professionally with superiors, I would fall more into a doormat role. For failure of not being obedient enough. And in school when I was younger, it was, teacher's pet. Well, what's about the teacher's pet? Always doing exactly the way everybody says things are supposed to be done, almost afraid to rock the boat, right? And I gave up analyzing why all that stuff happened. I mean, I have my own personal clues. It's not worth going down that tunnel. But that was, and so in those roles, what happened as I grew older, if you met me, some people met me, they would definitely identify me as a bulldozer, but in a professional setting, concerned about what others would think of me, and then having conflicting beliefs around respect and what am I supposed to do? And what does this culture advocate? Superiors give off a certain feeling tone about the way they want things done. If you're a sensitive doormat or sensitive to other people's feedback about what they think of you or how they think things should be done, or you have a interest in the outcome of that professionally, you might choose to withhold for fear of tipping the boat. And that's kind of what happened to me for a while. And then every now and then, if I was passionate about a particular topic, I'd build up the courage. I would blurt something out, but then I'd kind of come over to the bulldozer category. Relationships can very much be like in a doormat. If you're in a relationship and you have a difficulty communicating effectively, some people would describe this as, I just shut down when they get like that. I don't know what to say. It's all being withheld. And so there's a blockage of expression on the doormat side, where, a bulldozer, in the same person who may be stuck in a relationship or stuck professionally who can't communicate, they could be a complete bulldozer at the grocery store. Somebody misbags their groceries, and that might be that where their crazy gets triggered, and all of a sudden they're yelling at the grocery store. So their bulldozer may show up in odd places that you just wouldn't even expect it. The point is, we all have these extremes of emotional swings. Some are greater than others. Some don't swing quite so high. Some swing a little bit low, but we all have them. So today, when I'm talking about filters, and are you tired of using a filter? I will tell you, do you ever get tired of holding back within your communication? If you're a bulldozer, you are constantly, if you're a self-aware individual, so let me just back up a little bit. Ultimately, if you're hanging in these shows with me, that tells me one thing, that you're probably somebody who takes an attempt at looking within to find out where they can grow and change in order to better their life. That's what that tells me. If you're somebody who's just kind of out there, like a ball in a china shop, and you're just, doing your thing, and you are completely unaware of how you operate emotionally, physically, or mentally out there in the world, you're not watching the show. Okay. So what I'm saying is, when you're a bulldozer and you're self-aware of that, and you're aware that you might have a rough delivery sometimes of communication, or you've been known to hurt feelings, and you're working on yourself, you might get sick and tired of filtering everything. A bulldozer mentality might say something like, people just have a soft delivery nowadays. It just needs to be more abrupt and more to the point. And some of that I can completely agree with. And then some of it's my bulldozer coming out. Okay, so we get tired of filtering. And then the doormat is on the same thing, because the doormat is filtering so much that they don't even get anything out. Like they aren't even communicating because they're so busy shutting down and worrying about what everybody thinks about them that they don't effectively communicate. And so they're tired of their filter, which is kind of more like a blanket, right? It's just a blanket. It is completely blocking any sort of communication. So when you look at just the word filter, okay, just what is a filter? It's a device for removing impurities or particles that are of no use. So when we begin to become self-aware of ourselves and how we affect other people around us, and we start applying a filter to our communications, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to weed out all those impurities, and we're trying to weed out the negativity that could harm somebody. So if you're somebody who's a little bit tired of the filter, I totally understand. Growing is never easy. Learning how to communicate in a whole new way, which I will say, it's just not easy. And maybe it's not a whole new way, but when you start tweaking your communication style, and depending on the age you're at, when you start to do that, you are up against different beliefs that will just seem like, there's no way around it. Because the justifications and the reasons for why you do what you do in regards to your communication are so deep that you don't want to get rid of them. You just don't want to get rid of them. Because it's hard to come up with words. It's hard to figure out when is it the appropriate time to say something or not say something. So are you tired of holding back with your communication? Are you tired of hesitating when someone upsets you and not just telling them exactly what you think? Would you prefer to be direct, but instead you pause often? You're pausing all the time, maybe. Learning to filter our words is a skill. And it's a skill set. And the trick is to learn how to effectively verbalize our positions in life by eliminating the unwanted waste of negativity that can be felt through our tone of voice or our choice of words or just our presence. You've heard me probably mention before, what's it like to be in a room with you when you are emotionally off? What is that like? For your coworkers, if you have a bad day, for your spouse when you come home and you're just, or say you're somebody who's identifying wholeheartedly with depression, and that's your normal state, for a while. How is that affecting those around you? And so, when we're filtering and we're trying to take a step forward, it can be tiring. Why is all this so important? Because when we appropriately convey our communication, we allow for an exchange of openness for all of our relationships. That is why it is important to talk about the importance of filtering, even when it gets tiring. I was thinking about when I was doing the show, I was thinking about when is the appropriate discernment versus withholding expression. How do we learn when to say the appropriate, like when to address something that is just boiling over versus withholding our expression? I mean, because both can have an extreme. I can tell you that one of the clues that I personally use with discernment is before I speak, sometimes I will really think about what am I getting out of this? Like, what am I trying to convey? If I'm in a one-on-one conversation with someone, and let's say they have a point to prove and I have a point to prove, at some point I got to ask myself, what is this all about for me? Have you ever been in a discussion with somebody where you're trying to prove a point and they're trying to prove a point and the conversation is going nowhere, but you can feel the resistance? I'll just pause in that moment and say, what am I exactly trying to get out of this right now? Like, what am I trying to convey? What is my communication all about? Being right's not everything. And so at that point, there is a moment of discernment where I will just stop. Just stop. The argument's not worth it. Proving the point is not worth it. And so at that point, I make a conscious choice to withhold my expression. I withhold the expression. And so what are some of the tricks that you do in your relationships when it comes to rephrasing what you want to say and how you want to say it? And most importantly, what relationships are those in? So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a quick break. And when I come back, we're going to talk about some of that and talk about some different styles that you can try if you are finding yourself in a position of withholding too much like the doormat or expressing forcefully like the bulldozer. We'll be back. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and I am talking about emotional recovery in the raw. Most importantly, emotional elevation. Where in our lives can we step it up a little bit? And the first segment I shared talking about filtering our communication when it's become too much. How important is authentic expression in our relationships? Recently, between coaching clients, my individual experience, it's become so apparent to me how communication is really at the core of the quality of our life, how we communicate and who we communicate with. And I think one of the biggest learning factors for me personally over the years has been really when I'm able to put myself to the side and try to take almost a third party observation of what's going on between me and the relationship. You know, what are my motives in the relationship? What am I trying to get out of it? You know, ultimately, after a communication with a relationship, I mean, just look at your relationships. Take a look at all of them, like just a real quick glimpse. What's the quality? Are they providing fulfillment to you? And are you providing fulfillment to them? What is the quality of your relationships today? If there was one relationship in your life that you really wanted to come to terms with, and what I mean by that is maybe it's a professional relationship, maybe it's somebody at work that's just on your last nerve, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a child suffering from addiction in your family, maybe it's a spouse suffering from addiction, maybe it's an elderly parent who's coming to the end of their life. You know, really think about what is that one relationship that I would really appreciate if I had a new experience with. And then ask yourself, when it comes to my communication with this individual, am I doing my absolute best to go to another level? Or do I find myself repeating the same things and getting the same results and then wondering why I'm feeling so bad about it? Often those relationships, the one that keep returning to us the same feeling, that's what I mean by that, the relationships that keep returning to us the same feeling. And if that relationship that you're thinking of right now, I already know it probably doesn't feel that great, because we aren't going to think about the happy, joyous ones. We're thinking about that one. Or maybe you're reflecting on one in your past, maybe. But when you think about that relationship, you got to be somewhat challenged at how can I become better at my communication? You know, when I ended the first segment, I was talking about, you know, when we come back, I'd be talking about a couple of different things you can do in order to elevate the communication in those areas. But here's the thing, the work begins with you. The work begins with you. You know, I can sit here all day long and talk, but if you don't have a desire to change your ways to enhance your relationship, none of the work you do with anybody's ever going to suffice. It'll just go to the wayside. And so the question for you is, how committed are you to elevating your communication style? Think about your actions over the last week. Have you been an uplifter with your words of appreciation in your life to those around you? Or have you been maybe that bulldozer or the passive aggressive communication, or have you been argumentative? Because at the core of that, what I was hitting on in the first segment is at the core of all of our communication is going to be a deep understanding, or a deep, our beliefs. And so what I'm going to challenge you with on today's show, if you so dare afterwards to do some homework, or if you have a pen and paper right now and you want to do some homework, is I'm going to challenge you with a couple questions here. Because if you work with me, or if you listen to this show, here's what I really don't like to do. I'll tell you what I don't like to do. You know, when you realize what you don't like to do, then it tells a lot about a person. Here's what I don't like to do. I don't like to do a podcast or a show and blah, 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 blah. I could talk about current events. I could talk about all these different things, and I could get all riled up. At the end of the day, that in my opinion, that's not me helping you. What's me helping you is telling you what I do with my clients and is telling you what I personally apply in my life to help elevate and make change in your life. And either you're somebody who's willing to do that or not, because I got to tell you, when I'm working one-on-one with somebody, you got to be willing to bring it. I don't want to work with you if you're not willing to bring it. So I'm hoping somebody out there right now watching this show is willing to bring it. All right. So number one, let me switch over here real quick so I can see what the heck I'm doing. Number one. I hope that goes. Does that read right? Yeah. What's not working about your communication style? What's not working? What's not working? Think about it. What relationship, if you go back over the last week and you ask yourself, or you reflect and you think of that one person, or maybe a couple people even, that really, either forced you to go way within and withhold the doormat, or you felt like it forced you to explode because, you just felt it was necessary to put them in their place. Like whatever it was, just think about that. And what didn't work about that for you? What didn't work? If you had an opportunity to relive that experience, what would you have done differently? We just go forward. We just go forward in our life. Life is never meant to go backward. It's only meant to go forward. And sometimes we go forward without even pausing or reflecting enough about really, how could I do this better next time? Sometimes we bury so much inward, or we express so much outward that we embarrass ourselves that we don't want to revisit that. So the faster we close that door, the better we think we feel. But what happens is it's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. That old behavior and that old self will show up again. And so what's the common denominator with all those experiences? Well, it's going to be you. So what about that communication that you had would you like to change? Are you someone, when something is said to you from somebody really precious, in your life, that you're not giving them your authentic self? You're not telling them really what you think. Is that what's going on? And I'm going to ask you to take a look at the belief behind that. Why do you believe that that's the best way to be in your relationship? Why do you believe that? Why do you think it's okay to not learn how to have a voice in a relationship? Because you're the only one signing off on it. Nobody else is telling you to push all your words down deep inside. Nobody else is telling you to do that. If you're the doormat, sometimes working with a doormat core personality, it's kind of a tricky thing, because sometimes someone who is on that end of the extreme has such an inward message that it can be almost super damaging, but it's also their pride in reverse. So you got to kind of push them a little bit to be accountable to that, to be accountable to the habitual woe is me. And this is just the way it is. Or you got to, at some point, we got to grow up a little bit. At some point, we got to be willing to step out and make a change. So if you're a doormat and you are consistently withholding your communication in what seems like tough situations, I want to ask and ask yourself, what is your belief behind that behavior? Why do you keep doing that and not showing up in your relationships? Because I will tell you, all of us have something really good to offer our relationships. And I don't know about you, but I'm on this journey this one time. And if I can't authentically express myself appropriately to the people who mean something to me, then I'm not living. I'm not living. I'm waiting for everything around me to determine how I'm going to feel constantly. And I'm not taking authority over my being to have a fantastic relationship and to have a fantastic experience with someone. So is that you? And so if you are choosing to withhold and you are choosing to bury the communication and you don't know how to say no yet, and some of us just don't know how to say no. So we just layer that on, layer it on. Don't say no, don't say no. Keep showing up, keep ignoring our needs, keep giving in, keep not setting boundaries, right? What is your belief behind that? Why do you keep doing that? because you're the only one that can get to the bottom of it. What is your belief behind that? Yeah, I didn't expect to lean so much into the doormats today, but that's what I'm doing. That message must be meant for somebody. I've had a few people recently who are finding out that the doormat, really, which is about withholding expression and withholding communication, has been at the core of years of dysfunctional. I don't know, the whole relationship's been dysfunctional, but just at the core of dysfunction for them. Okay, they've continued to be unhappy in certain areas of their life. And what has happened is they're starting to discover that not authentically expressing how they feel in a relationship has really haunted them. And it's kept them from having their needs met. It's kept them from having their needs met. So I'm going to take another break. I'm going to give you a little breather. And when I come back, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I mean, I wasn't even planning on talking about that. So we're just going to roll with it. Something on communication and doormats and bulldozers. And I've got some more coaching questions for you, actually. All right. So we will be back here shortly. Get your pen and paper if you're up and doing some homework. And if not, you can listen in. So hopefully there's something I deliver today that's going to help you have a fuller life and all that good stuff. We'll be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and I am talking about emotional recovery in the raw. As always, emotional elevation. How can you elevate your life emotionally so that you can have more fulfillment and more joy? Because, my motto is enjoy the journey, you are worth it. And worth has a lot to do with what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do when it comes to elevating our life to a new level. For the first half of the show, I've been simply talking about removing that filter of communication, or you're wearing too much of a filter or placing too much of a filter in where you're not authentically expressing yourself in your relationships. And I've given a few examples of that. I've gone through the bulldozer description. The person who's going to outwardly express too much, they can be told that they're intimidating. They can be told that they're mean, condescending. The damage that a bulldozer can do in the relationship is kind of like that. Irreparable. Is that even a word? Irreparable. You know what I'm saying? Like that relationship is not, it can't go back. I mean, sometimes the words of a bulldozer are so harsh and so hurtful. The word rage, have you ever been around somebody who's in a rage? Well, that would be an extreme bulldozer moment. And then the other one is the doormat, who's going to internalize everything, afraid of expressing anything for fear of hurting somebody's feelings, for fear of what are they going to think of me. Ultimately, it's pride in reverse, self-centeredness and selfishness to the extreme, but it's internalized. And so the damage there kind of goes into, internally. So I've had one friend describe it as one's homicidal, one's suicidal. But at the end of the day, we each have a little bit of each in us. It just kind of depends on what the scenario is and where we're at. For example, here's a good one that I always like to kind of hammer in a little bit. When I was talking about, what are your beliefs about how you communicate? So if you're somebody who's constantly, bringing it in and not expressing yourself, you're probably also somebody who might, you might withhold, speak softly. These are some of the telltales of somebody who does that. And so you get to take a look at the quality of your relationships around that. Children, that's where I'm going with this. So you might have something like that. Let's say you're somebody like that professionally. I shared a little bit of my story about being kind of like almost like a confident doormat with superiors. I had confidence, but I still wasn't effectively communicating what I needed to when it got tough. And my beliefs behind some of that was, well, I mean, honestly, I was kind of working for folks that I didn't necessarily respect or agree with after so many years. And so some of it was kind of a cop out on my end. Like, is it even worth it? Like I don't want to get all stressed out over this communication. And, so I had a lot to discover about myself, but I had like this confident doormat syndrome going on. Right. So let's say you're somebody like you've got that going on professionally, but then you come home to your children and you're a bulldozer. The kids who didn't ask for you to come through the door upset that night. The kids who simply just probably were watching TV too long or didn't pick up their bedroom, but you lose your crazy on them. They're not looking for that delivery. They're just kind of being kids. Like they have this whole life they live that nobody, So what are your beliefs behind that? What is the sense of entitlement somebody may come with parenting sometimes? And I know this is probably a sensitive issue. You get all kinds of beliefs. I was listening to somebody the other day talk about how, world's going to hell. These damn kids. I thought, Jesus Christ, what am I, 80? I mean, I'm sorry, but hell, I mean, they're just kids. It's the same story. It's been going on for centuries. The time when I give into fear and intimidation over the state of my kids, you want to hear some crazy ass kid stories, you just give me a call. And I will tell you, I love them unconditionally and they're fantastic children. I absolutely want to support them in everything they do. But if you're a parent coming home as a bulldozer mentality with your kids, take a look at your beliefs about why that is so important. Is it more important to encourage the people around you? Or is it more important to criticize them for not doing a homework assignment? I don't know. Your choice. We can go on. I can go on and on about that subject. But the point is, what are you bringing to your relationships? And whatever it is, if it's not working, if you've got static, it's in your belief system. It's in your belief system. So I work on you. Look at the relationships that aren't working. Which ones are frustrating you? Which ones aren't fulfilling you? And take a look at what is the belief behind it. And is that belief serving me? And are you willing to change the belief? Are you willing to change it? Because you may not be. You might be so full of entitlement about something, and because God forbid we don't have principles, right? Because then we just feel like a hole in the donut. And who the hell knows where I'm going to end up if I change? Isn't that the scary thing about changing? Isn't that why nobody wants to be vulnerable with change? Because if I change, I won't know where my next step is. If I change, I won't know what to do in the next occasion. If I change, I might actually get stuck for words and I won't know who I am anymore. Oh my God, it's a whole new identity. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a blissful new experience when you start to change. So, all right, another little tangent. Here we go. Here's a question for you. Oh, I love this question. So let's say we're talking about relationships. I'm talking about relationships. I'm talking about communication style. I'm pushing you for which ones aren't working. Where do you want to change it up in your life? Or are you too old? Are you too obstinate? Are you too unwilling to take a look at your beliefs? You choose. I'm not going to choose for you. But here's the question for you. What will your future look like and feel like if you don't do anything different? Just think about it. What will it look like? What will be the long-term effect of the quality of that relationship if you don't do anything different? If you just keep on keeping on, leaving it up to everybody else to satisfy you, what is your default future? What's going to happen? Where do you see yourself in 10 years with that relationship? If you're withholding, if you're choosing not to have a voice, or if you're choosing to be a bully in your relationships. You're strong, you're intimidating, and you're not checking yourself in your most heartfelt relationships. Where do you see that relationship? And where do you see your future? Where's your default future with that type of behavior, either internally or externally? And this is why I talk about extremes. This is why I talk about the stuff that, going within. And when it really starts with you, it is so important to recognize that, because nobody else can do this type of work but you. I'm just such an advocate of getting to the root. I just had the thought, I won't even share it. So anyway, I'm going to put that filter on. That's what I'm going to do right there. I'm going to put the filter on, because sometimes the filter is appropriate and sometimes the filter needs to come off completely. But ask yourself, if I continue to show up this way, what is my future going to really look like in that area? Am I going to be the man or the woman that I want to be if I continue to show up and behave in this way? If I continue to not have a voice, if I continue to move around all the time, if I continue to complain and gossip and be negative, if I continue to always be so important about being right and proving somebody else wrong, what are my relationships going to really look like in a few years from now? Am I going to be the person that I want to be if I continue to show up like this? I don't know. And maybe you say, well, I don't really show up for myself that much, so it's not a problem. That could be you. Maybe it's not a problem. All right. What's the next question? Oh, here we go. Here's a question for you. So now that we're talking about changing and you're looking at changing your communication style, really taking an inward look at, what am I doing and is it working for me? Because remember, when I talk about the work around communication and I talk about the work of taking the filter off or putting more of a filter in place, why do I share all this with you? Why do I push you so much? Why do I get so straightforward about the effects of this? Why do I go on significant tangents to push somebody to grow? Because at the end of that is amazing opportunity for you to fulfill the life that you need. When you can effectively communicate with somebody, you get your needs met. And what happens when you get your needs met is your life overall becomes blissful and enjoyable. And you get to learn what it's like to be enthusiastic, and you get to know what it's like to be spontaneous and to have faith that everything's going to be okay. And there's no longer a feeling that you're no longer asking yourself, how am I going to feel about me based on what you do? If I'm determining how I feel about me based on your next move, then I got a problem. If I'm determining my emotions and my self-confidence based on the feedback that you're going to give me, then I've got a problem. Right? And so that's why I push so hard on this, because ultimately learning a way of communicating that effectively meets our needs and gives us what we desire, that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the good stuff is. All right. Let's probably do one more question before we take our final break. Let me see. Oh, what would a full commitment look like for you? If any of what I'm saying today is resonating with you, if anything is resonating with you, what would a full commitment look like for you? What is your skin in the game? You got any skin in the game for change? Do you have any skin in the game for change? That's my question for you. What would a full commitment look like? Would it require an end of the day journaling? Would it require going deep, getting somebody to work with you? Would it require going back through, or even, so much things can be done online today, free of charge, by the way. But, going online and downloading educational content on communication. Would it mean reading a couple books? Like, what would a full commitment look like for you? In the beginning, it may just be a baby step of acknowledging and taking a look over the past week or so about what worked and what didn't work with your communication style. Another beginning step for you might just simply be sitting down with a pen and paper and looking at, a brief history of how you have shown up in relationships and what's worked for you and what hasn't worked for you. If you identify more with the bulldozer, then write down, in a journal why that doesn't work. What has been the result of your bulldozing? How many relationships have you blown up? How many people have you intimidated to the point where they can't authentically communicate with you because they're so scared of your temper? If you're a doormat, how many relationships have you blamed the other person for just being being intimidating, being scary, but you've never stood your ground? You've never shown them a new way to treat you. You've consistently withheld out of all kinds of different reasons, probably. And I'll give the exception in both of these worlds. I just want to be really clear here. There is no place for abuse, mental, emotional, or physical. So if that's your situation, seek help, do what you got to do. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the relationships that day in and day out we show up in, and yet we have some dysfunction going on with our communication. And we've yet to get to the root of it. We have covered it with justifications and beliefs that we've probably even lost him at that point. It will ultimately affect the quality of our life and keep us from really manifesting the beautiful things that are possible for us. That's why I push on you so hard. Okay, so now we're going to go to break. And when we come back, I'm just going to wrap up and call it a show when we come back. All right, be back. Hey everyone, welcome to the Know You're Crazy Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and I'm talking about emotional recovery in the raw. in particular today, putting the filter on or removing the filter. I can't help but smile because I'm traveling right now and I'm in a hotel room doing the show, and this hotel is under construction. there's a drill going off in here in the background. And I was thinking, thank God I got a filter right now, right? Because it'll probably let me handle that situation so much better once I get done with this show. And I'm praying that goes away here shortly. But just an example of how, we check ourselves when things in life don't exactly go the way we plan them to go, and all is well. So, I was at break, I was sitting here thinking, I wish I just wish, I wish I had a really good story. I hope I've conveyed to you today about how important it is to recognize where the break in communication can be for us, and how it is so important to be able to get to the root of that a little bit and be able to put in practices to change that for you, to change it for me. The quality of my relationships have enhanced over the years simply by pausing and learning a new way of doing it. It was more than just pausing. In recovery, in recovery from alcoholism and addiction, we have this thing called pause when agitated. I probably said it on the show before. And I always like to say where I get that stuff from, because, everything I bring to you, either I've read, I've studied, some of it may be intuitive, but a lot of it's, it's been given to me by the grace of others and in their experience. And so pause when agitated, and that is such a great tool. But here's the thing, if you're always pausing because you're always agitated, then there's a little bit more work to do. And that's where I come into play. And that's why I do shows like I do today, where I really challenge you to ask yourself where you could change in your communication style. Are you somebody who you want to get a hold of somebody and they don't answer their cell phone, so you blow up their phone 3 or 4 times? Is that you? What do you think that's doing to the relationship? I mean, really, things like this, really taking a pause and asking ourselves, are my behaviors and the way I'm communicating to somebody in my life, are they appropriate? Are they going to honor me in the long run for that future that I want with this individual, or the future that I want with this company? Is the way I'm showing up going to effectively give me everything that I desire in my life? Or am I being blocked by something, in the way that I communicate that is just not going to help me long term? It's just not going to help me. I have an elderly mom that, we lost my dad to COVID in December of 20. And she, unfortunately, is like 1,400 miles away. And it's been really sad on my sister and I, who don't live there. She's in assisted living, she's 81, the memory's kind of starting to go, and she doesn't have visitors. Everybody, and what I've learned about death in family and in people close is what I learned, and I don't say this in a shameful way towards anybody, but a lot of people show up at the time of death, but then as life moves on, everybody kind of goes away. So everybody's got great intentions in the beginning because it's new, it's new. The passing's new. Everybody wants to show up and bring meals, and they say they're going to go and meet somebody and go visit them. But they don't, because, they get busy with their own life. And that's why I said, it's okay. This isn't a shameful thing. But unfortunately, she's been alone and she hasn't had a lot of visitors. This is the same woman. And I always share authentically. I was raised in alcoholism, and she suffered from the disease. And so we had a very troubled upbringing together. She was the adult, I was a child, but it was rough. It was rough. And there was a lot of, head hitting, because I was the bulldozer in that regards. Right. And she was kind of like the doormat. And so we didn't mix real well. So that's why I said, so a lot of the things I give to you come from personal experience. I know what it's like to live with somebody who is in deep misery and depression and alcoholism, wrecked to their core. And I know as a bulldozer how difficult it can be to withhold and to not tell them what you think when the treatment feels so unfair. And I also know what it's like to be a doormat and not have a voice for fear of what the other person's going to think. And so my mom, who has no visitors really, she's got a couple people who might show up for her, but not a lot. She's been alone. And recently, I made a decision to move her to where I'm at, 1,400 miles away. And this is the beautiful thing about communication when you clear it up and you're able to authentically be there for someone. This is an 81-year-old woman. And I can tell you, some people do so much damage in their lives that when they're old, the kids don't feel sorry for them no more. They'd be like in their 85, they'd be old, but they're still crotchety and mean. And the adult child is still being impacted by that communication. The adult child is still being impacted. And in some cases, there has to be healthy boundaries where they just can't even see them anymore. But thank God I've done some work, and mom did too. And so I get to move my mom up here. And so I call her, not knowing if she's going to pick up that phone or not, because she likes to sleep a lot. And I call her and I ask her, I tell her, and my sister and I were pretty excited about this. You know what it means? It's kind of like in life when you align appropriately and life is good and things are healthy, the universe is going to give me signs, and either I'm open to those signs or I'm not. And so when I randomly get an email out of the blue about senior living and memory care, I jump on that. I'm no longer hindered by beliefs that things aren't working in my favor. I'm no longer hindered by that. I believe that everything that comes into my life is absolutely meant to be there for a reason. And either I'm going to learn and embrace from it, or I'm going to feel sorry for myself about it, or I'm going to get angry about it, or I'm going to blame somebody for it, right? But for the majority of the time, I'm going to take full accountability and responsibility for my life and for my relationships. And so I get this email and I jump all over it. And lo and behold, everything just keeps working out. But I call her the other day and she answers, and I was just shocked, And, I give her a hard time because I said, I talked to her about moving out and she went along with it. And I said, well, I'm going to be there on this day. And she says, oh, I'll believe it when I see it. She's razzing me, giving me a hard time. And I get to joke with her. And, there's no more complication in that communication. That there's no more needing to fake filter. I am authentically myself because I can give out love and I can receive. I know I have a voice. I worked through my things. I learned how to ask for what I need. I learned how to set boundaries when I needed to, but every single time I had to be able to do it appropriately and with some tact and respect for the other person on the other end. If you're a doormat in your relationship and you're not authentically giving back to that relationship, what are you giving then? If the person doesn't know how to treat you or what are they getting out of it? That they're not filling all of you because you're withholding. They're being robbed. They're being robbed of a fantastic, exciting, joyous relationship because you won't speak up. They need you to speak up sometimes. And if you're the bulldozer and you're intimidating and you're all about making demands and people doing it your way, what are you getting out of that? What are you getting out of it? Do people feel safe emotionally around you? And if they don't, does that make you feel good? And so, there's these long-term relationships in our life, and sometimes they're professional and sometimes they're personal. But at the end of the day, is my communication authentic? Is it respectful? Am I getting my needs met? Do I know how to effectively show up? And to get there for me, it may not be for you, but for me, I had to do a lot of introspection and I had to do a lot of work. And I had to ask myself and abide by those same tough questions that I gave you today. And I had to be abrupt with myself, and I had to pull my big girl pants up with myself, just like I'm pushing you today. I coach people who are willing to do the work because it takes work to make life changes. It takes work. But when you are led appropriately, and when the questions that cause you to think, and when you know you're in good hands, amazing things can happen for you. Amazing things can happen for you. Amazing things like me to have a beautiful relationship with an elderly mother who I love dearly, who I get to bring out here. Pray for us in that road trip. Could be planes, trains, and automobiles for all I know. But I'm blessed because I understand where my communication is with her today. And that's what I wish for you. That's why I do shows like I do. That's why I do rephrasing and reframing. That's why I do scripting. That's why I do reset expectations. All the shows I've done is to help you build a toolbox. If you're doing this by yourself, then take a look and do some work. If you want your relationships to enhance. All right. That is a wrap for today. I got like 1 minute to go. So until we meet next time, may you have a fantastic next couple weeks. May your intuitive hits blossom for you. May the universe bring you nothing but sweetness and abundance and love. And know that I'm thinking of you and I am wishing the best for you. And have a nice evening. That's a wrap. You have been listening to Know You're Crazy.
Crazy.
And my name is Susan Denee. We are identifying, understanding, and treating your crazy one episode at a time. Tune in to transformationtalkradio.com. To connect with me or Growth Spurt Your Life, please visit susandenee.com. That's Susan Denee, DENEE.com.